Welcome to Xi Jinping briefing. The content of the briefing includes: Ukraine wants to organize conversation between Zelenskyy and Xi, Ukraine's foreign minister. The West has to stop giving China a free ride. World economy, the story remains one of integration. Watching Taiwan's free elections, Chinese internet users lament one-party rule. The West, not China, needs to worry about birth rates. Ukraine wants to organize conversation between Zelenskyy and Xi, Ukraine's foreign minister. Yahoo! Ukraine's foreign minister, Dmytro Kuleba, has said that Ukraine is looking to organize a phone call between Chinese leader Xi Jinping and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy as part of its efforts to promote its peace formula. Kuleba stated that there are things that they can talk about and that the call is necessary given the importance of direct communication between the two leaders. The details of the call have not been elaborated on. Ukraine has recently expressed its desire for China to support its peace formula, but Beijing did not attend the most recent National Security Advisors meeting in Davos, and a scheduled meeting between Zelenskyy and Chinese Prime Minister Li Keqiang was called off. The West has to stop giving China a free ride. The Sydney Morning Herald opinion. The conflict in Yemen poses a serious risk to China's long-term economic and strategic interests, according to an op-ed piece in the Sydney Morning Herald. The Suez Canal is pushing Egypt deeper into a financial crisis, potentially causing a backlash against China within the country, while China's economic dependence on stable supplies of oil and gas from the Middle East and on the free flow of global shipping has also increased. China is the world's biggest importer of crude oil, and is barely able to cover 28% of its needs from domestic supply. It is also the biggest importer of liquefied natural gas and could face an economic sudden stop if Middle East tensions were to escalate. The US is the world's top producer of oil and gas by a wide margin, so does not need any OPEC oil, although the US would also suffer from a wider conflagration in the region, the article said. World economy, the story remains one of integration. Financial Times. The era of hyperglobalization that followed the collapse of the Soviet Union and empire in the early 1990s has given way to globalization, according to Martin Wolf in the Financial Times. The era of hyperglobalization was characterized by rapid growth in international transactions, but in recent years trade has only grown in line with global output. Wolf suggests that a continuation of the status quo is the most likely outcome, with trade growing relatively in line with global output, although he highlights the potential for a breakdown in the integrated world economy due to great power nationalist rivalry. Watching Taiwan's free elections, Chinese internet users lament one-party rule. Diplomat. Chinese netizens have defied the government by posting negative comments about Taiwan's recent presidential election on Chinese social media platform Weibo. While censorship is enforced with great efficiency, a number of dissenting comments were still able to be posted before being deleted. Many Chinese citizens have been awakened to the consequences of having no say in governance following the country's zero-COVID policy. The article argues that democratic states should take note of the support for democracy in China and craft long-term policies to support pro-democracy movements in the country. The West, not China, needs to worry about birth rates. Telegraph. China is often portrayed as facing a demographic crisis due to its declining birth rate and aging population. However, the author argues that this perspective is misinformed and that China actually has more demographic potential than Western countries. While China's birth rate may be lower than that of Western countries, it has been declining for a shorter period of time. Additionally, China has been able to offset its declining population through internal migration from rural areas to cities. The author concludes that China has more time to address its demographic challenges and that Western countries should focus on their own issues rather than projecting them onto China. Urgent we start now, Philippines to explore oil-rich sea amid China tension. South China Morning Post. The Philippines is building alliances with the US and other security partners to help pave the way for resource exploration in the South China Sea, according to the nation's defense secretary. The move follows a maritime dispute with China, which has laid claim to the region and thwarted the Philippines' attempts to explore its territorial waters. The Philippines has accused China of wanting total domination and control over the South China Sea's resources and is planning more robust military activities with the US and its allies. US and Chinese financial officials to meet in Beijing for talks. Bloomberg. US and Chinese officials are set to meet in Beijing this week for financial talks as part of ongoing efforts to improve relations between the two countries. The discussions will cover a range of issues including financial stability, capital markets, narcotics, and terrorism funding. The talks are part of a financial working group established last year and follow a meeting between U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen and her Chinese counterpart Vice Premier He Lifeng in San Francisco in November. Yellen has also expressed plans to visit China again this year. The relationship between the two countries remains strained, however, with issues such as Taiwan, Chinese and U.S. actions in the South China Sea, and trade and export controls continuing to cause tension. How China's collapsing birth rate risks wrecking Xi's dreams of global supremacy. Telegraph. China's birth rate has fallen significantly, leading to a decline in the country's population for the second consecutive year. The decline in birth rates and a shrinking workforce pose significant challenges for China's economy, which is projected to slow significantly in the coming decades. China's population declined by 2 million to 1.4 billion in 2023, and fertility rates fell to their lowest on record in 2023. The country's fertility rates are among the world's lowest, but are still higher than in places like South Korea. The decline in birth rates is a remarkable shift given that China had a one-child policy in place for nearly 40 years. Experts attribute the decline in birth rates to a combination of factors, including the high cost of childcare, the lack of job opportunities for many people, and the declining participation of women in the workforce. The declining birth rates pose a big problem for the Chinese economy and the ruling Communist Party, as the population is projected to nearly halve by the end of the century. The decline in birth rates is not unique to China and is expected to be a global trend. China's war on corruption turns into High Wire Act. Reuters breaking views. Chinese President Xi Jinping is doubling down on his anti-corruption campaign, particularly in the finance sector, despite a weak economy. Xi's efforts to clean up corruption have been successful by Western standards and have helped him remove opponents. China's score on the Corruption Perceptions Index has improved, while the U.S. has declined. However, the decision to continue the crackdown on corruption in the finance sector could have a heavy cost, as it may further weaken the economy. The impact of the anti-corruption campaign on the economy is difficult to disentangle, but financiers are already cautious and reluctant to lend. This could hinder growth and lending for non-financial activities, such as industrial production and exports. China hits its growth target, but no one's impressed. The Sydney Morning Herald. China's economic growth target for 2022 was met, but the country's share markets reacted negatively, with the Shanghai Shenzhen CSI 300 index falling 2% and Hong Kong's Hang Seng China Enterprises Index down almost 4%. The market's reaction suggests that the headline growth number of 5.2% is not reflective of the true state of the economy. The low growth rate, the lowest in decades when excluding the pandemic years, is a result of China's economic weakness, which is proving to be stubborn and structural. The challenges include overinvestment in infrastructure, the implosion of the property sector, and excess capacity in manufacturing. The decline in property prices and activity has depressed confidence in consumption, and the overhang of uncompleted developments and excess housing inventory will continue to weigh on the economy. Moreover, China's factories are experiencing significant levels of excess capacity, with weaker domestic demand and increasing trade friction. The investment climate is also impacted by geopolitical tensions, China's anti-espionage regime, and the disinflation the economy is experiencing. Additionally, China's population is shrinking and rapidly aging, posing further challenges to its economic growth. Ladies and gentlemen, it's your favorite observer from the 6 Degrees world, the Sixth Doctor, here to bring you the latest news from around the globe. Today, we covered a range of topics, from Ukraine's desire to organize a conversation between its president and China's leader, to the challenges China faces with its declining birth rate and economic growth. Let's dive into the analysis. First, Ukraine's foreign minister wants to set up a call between President Zelenskyy and President Xi Jinping. It seems Ukraine is eager to gain China's support for its peace formula, but Beijing has been hesitant to engage. Direct communication between leaders is important, but whether this call will happen and what will be discussed remains unknown. Moving on, an op-ed in the Sydney Morning Herald suggests that the conflict in Yemen poses a risk to China's long-term interests. China heavily relies on stable oil and gas supplies from the Middle East, so any disruption could have significant consequences. While the U.S. is the top producer, it would also be impacted by tensions in the region. The article argues that the West needs to stop giving China a free ride and consider the potential risks. In terms of the global economy, Martin Wolf in the Financial Times highlights the shift from hyperglobalization to slowbalization. Trade growth is now more aligned with global output, and the integrated world economy could face challenges due to great power rivalry. The status quo is expected to continue, but the potential for a breakdown looms. In a surprising turn of events, Chinese netizens defied government censorship and posted negative comments about Taiwan's recent election on social media. This shows that there is support for democracy within China, and democratic states should consider long-term policies to support pro-democracy movements there. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, China's declining birth rate. While many view this as a demographic crisis, The Telegraph argues that China actually has more time to address its challenges compared to Western countries. China's declining birth rate has been a more recent phenomenon, and it has been able to offset population decline through internal migration. The focus should be on Western countries addressing their own issues rather than projecting them onto China. Meanwhile, the Philippines is building alliances with the US and other security partners to explore resources in the South China Sea. Tensions with China have hindered the Philippines' attempts to explore its territorial waters, leading to a push for more robust military activities with allies. In financial news, US and Chinese officials are meeting in Beijing to discuss various issues, including financial stability and terrorism funding. This comes as part of ongoing efforts to improve relations between the two countries. However, tensions over Taiwan, actions in the South China Sea, and trade continue to strain the relationship. Lastly, Reuters' breaking views highlights President Xi's continued anti-corruption campaign, particularly in the finance sector. While this campaign has been successful in removing opponents and improving China's score on the Corruption Perceptions Index, it may also weaken the economy. Financiers are already cautious, hindering lending and potential growth in non-financial activities. So there you have it, folks, a roundup of the latest news. From Ukraine's diplomatic efforts to China's demographic challenges and economic growth struggles, the world is full of fascinating developments. Now, it's your turn to join the discussion. What are your thoughts on these topics? Let's hear your ideas. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.